You're paying for this baby." The words didn't echo, they landed. Heavy, deliberate, final. And then, silence. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Have you ever been in a room where everything just stops? No whispers, no shifting, no coughs, just eyes. All of them on you. That's where Ava Carter sat, 27 years old, back straight, hands folded, face calm in a way that didn't match the moment, because across the courtroom, her husband Daniel wasn't sitting beside her. He was standing, next to her sister, holding her hand. Let that sink in. Lila Carter, 28, pregnant, eyes glossy, lips trembling just enough to look convincing. Her fingers laced tightly with Daniel's, as if he were the one protecting her. And Ava? May she just watched them. No outburst, no denial, not even confusion. Just a small, controlled smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Now ask yourself this. What kind of situation leads to a husband standing with his wife's sister? In court. Over a baby? And, more importantly, why was everyone acting like Ava was the one responsible? You've heard this statement, the judge said, adjusting his glasses as he looked down at the file. Mrs. Carter, do you understand the claim being made against you? Claim, such a clean word for something so ugly. Ava nodded once. I do. Her voice was steady, too steady, and that's when it became impossible to ignore the rest of the room. Her parents were there. Robert Carter, 58, rigid posture, jaw clenched like he'd already decided how this would end. Elaine Carter, 55, arms folded tightly, eyes avoiding Ava completely. They weren't confused. They weren't conflicted. They had chosen a side, and it wasn't hers. It's your responsibility, her father said suddenly, his voice cutting through the air with practiced certainty. You agreed to this. Agreed? A few people in the gallery shifted. Someone whispered. Because now the question had changed. This wasn't just betrayal. This sounded planned. Ava tilted her head slightly, finally looking directly at him. Not angry, not hurt, just observant. Like she was taking notes. Daniel squeezed Lila's hand again. Subtle, but intentional. We're not asking for anything unreasonable, Daniel added, his tone calm, almost rehearsed. You signed the agreement. You knew what this meant? There it was again. Agreement. But what agreement could possibly tie a woman to her husband's child with her own sister? Think about that. What would you have done in that moment? Shouted, denied it, walked out? Ava didn't do any of those things. She leaned back slightly in her chair and smiled. Not wide, not dramatic, just enough. Enough to make Daniel hesitate for half a second. Enough to make Lila's grip tighten. Enough to make something in the room feel off. Because that wasn't the reaction of someone losing. That was the reaction of someone waiting. The judge leaned forward. Mrs. Carter, I'll ask you directly. Do you deny financial responsibility for this child? There it was. The moment everything hinged on. Ava's gaze moved slowly. Daniel, Lila, her parents, each one expecting something different. Each one completely certain they already knew the answer. She took a breath, and then, calmly, almost gently, she said, No. A ripple moved through the courtroom. Daniel's shoulders dropped slightly, relief flashing across his face before he could hide it. Lila exhaled, her expression softening. Her mother closed her eyes like a crisis had just been avoided. Too easy. Way too easy. And that's when Ava moved. Slowly, deliberately. She reached down beside her chair and pulled out a folder. Thin, neatly organized. Not something grabbed in panic. Something prepared. She placed it on the table in front of her, tapped it once with her fingers, and then looked up, that same small smile returning. I don't deny anything, she repeated softly. A pause. But I think we should read everything out loud. The shift was instant. Daniel's expression faltered. Lila's hand slipped slightly in his. Her father frowned. Because suddenly, they weren't in control anymore. And whatever was inside that folder had been waiting for this exact moment. What do you mean? Everything. Daniel's voice didn't carry the same confidence anymore. It was subtle, easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. But Ava noticed. She always noticed. That was the thing about Ava Carter. She didn't react fast. She observed first. And by the time she moved, it was already too late for everyone else. She slid the folder slightly forward, turning it so it faced the judge. Every page, she said calmly. Every clause. Every signature. Every addition. Addition. That word didn't belong there. And it hit exactly how she intended. Lila's brows furrowed instantly. What addition? There it was. That crack. Small but real. Ava didn't answer her. Instead, she turned her attention back to the judge, her tone respectful, composed. Your Honor, I believe the full context of the agreement being referenced hasn't been presented. A pause. The kind that stretches just long enough to make people uncomfortable. The judge leaned forward slightly. You're saying the document submitted is incomplete? Yes. One word, clean, direct, dangerous. You could feel the shift now, not just in the room, but in the energy. Because a moment ago, this had looked like a straightforward case. Now it felt like something was about to unravel. Daniel stepped forward slightly, jaw tightening. That's not accurate. On the agreement is exactly as it was signed. Ava finally looked at him fully. And for the first time, there was something behind her eyes. Not anger, not pain, recognition. Like she was seeing him clearly for the first time, and it didn't impress her. Is it? She asked softly. Not confrontational, not loud, just enough to make him second-guess himself, and he did. Just for a second. But again, Ava noticed. Always. Your Honor, Ava continued, gently opening the folder. I'd like permission to read a section of the document myself. Her lawyer, who had been silent this entire time, finally shifted beside her, but didn't interrupt. That alone said something. Because what kind of lawyer stays quiet? Unless they already know what's coming? The judge hesitated, looked between both parties, then nodded once. I proceed. And just like that, the control shifted completely. Ava adjusted the papers, her fingers precise, unshaking. Page 1. Her voice filled the courtroom, not loud but steady enough that no one could ignore it. Financial Responsibility Agreement, she began, signed by Ava Carter and Daniel Carter. Normal so far. Predictable. Exactly what Daniel wanted. She turned a page. The purpose of this agreement is to outline shared financial obligations within the household. Lila relaxed slightly. Her mother exhaled. Even her father's posture softened just a fraction. Because it sounded harmless, routine, safe, and that's exactly why Ava read it that way. Slow, clear, almost boring. Because when people think they're safe, they stop paying attention. And that's when you change everything. She flipped another page. The undersigned agrees to assume financial responsibility for dependents under the household structure. Daniel nodded faintly, like this was the part that mattered. Like this was the trap closing. And for a moment, if you didn't know better, you'd think Ava had just confirmed everything. She paused. Just long enough. Eyes scanning the paper. Then, she smiled again. Different this time. Sharper. However, she continued, one word, and the entire room froze. Because that word hadn't been mentioned before, Daniel's expression dropped instantly. What? Let her finish, the judge interrupted. Too late. The damage had already started. Ava lifted the page slightly. Not the original sheet, a separate one. Attached, documented, signed. Addendum A, she read. All entered and notarized following the initial agreement. Lila's grip on Daniel's hand broke completely now. Her voice came out thin. I didn't know about any addendum. Of course she didn't. That was the point. Ava didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge her, because this was never about convincing them. It was about showing everyone else. Slowly, carefully, irrefutably. She took a breath, and then her voice dropped, just slightly, enough to pull everyone in. In the event of deception, undisclosed relationships, or intentional financial manipulation, Daniel went completely still. Not defensive. Not angry. Still. Like his body had just realized something his mind hadn't caught up to yet. Ava's eyes lifted from the page, locked onto his, and for the first time, her smile disappeared completely. When what replaced it was something colder. This agreement becomes null and void, and all liability transfers to the party found in violation. Silence, not courtroom silence, the kind that feels heavy, like something just snapped into place. And suddenly, everyone understood, but not everyone reacted the same way. Because Daniel's face, it didn't just change, it drained. Color gone, confidence gone, control gone. And Lila, she stepped back, physically, like distance might somehow undo what she just heard. Her father's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Her mother looked between them, confusion turning into something sharper. Fear. Because now, this wasn't about forcing Ava to pay. This was about what they had just walked into. And Ava, she lowered the paper slowly, calm again, composed again, when like she had just been waiting for this exact moment. But here's the real question. If she already knew everything, if she had this the whole time, then why did she wait until now? Why let it go this far? Why let them believe they had already won? She placed the document back down and said quietly, "I think we're done pretending." It didn't start in a courtroom. It started with something so small it was almost easy to ignore. Have you ever dismissed a feeling just because it was inconvenient? That quiet voice that says, something's off, but everything around you looks normal enough that you push it down? That's exactly where Ava was. 3 months before the courtroom, before the pregnancy, before the betrayal had a name, back when her life still looked stable. Ava Carter, 27, financial analyst, structured, or predictable, careful. Her world ran on numbers, plans, and control. And Daniel Carter, 32, charming, persuasive, the kind of man who could smooth over anything with the right tone. They'd been married for 3 years. From the outside, they worked. No explosive fights, no dramatic breakdowns, just balance. Or at least, that's what Ava thought. Until Lila moved in. Just for a little while, her sister had said. Lila Carter, 28. Restless, impulsive, always between phases of her life. Their parents had framed it as temporary support. Ava had agreed without hesitation, because that's what she always did. She handled things. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Late dinners, casual conversations, the three of them sharing space like some slightly awkward version of normal. But then, small things started stacking. And Daniel laughing a little too long at Lila's jokes. Lila texting him from across the room instead of speaking out loud. Conversations that stopped the moment Ava walked in. Tiny things, dismissible things. And that's exactly what Ava did. Dismiss them. Until the night she couldn't. It was late, past midnight. Ava had woken up thirsty, one of those restless nights where sleep doesn't quite settle. She walked into the kitchen quietly and stopped. Voices, low, urgent, Lila, Daniel. She can't find out yet. Ava froze, not because of the words, but because of the tone. That wasn't casual. That wasn't harmless. That was careful. Daniel's voice followed, quieter, controlled. She won't. Not until it's too late. Too late for what? That question hit instantly, sharp, immediate. But Ava didn't step forward. I didn't interrupt, didn't confront. She stepped back, silently, like she had never been there. And that moment, that's when everything shifted. Not outwardly. Nothing exploded. The next morning, breakfast happened like usual. Lila smiled. Daniel kissed Ava goodbye. Routine stayed intact. But Ava, she changed. She started noticing patterns, tracking behavior the way she tracked numbers. Because once you see something, you can't unsee it. Money started disappearing in small amounts. Shared expenses didn't match what she remembered. Transfers that didn't align with anything she'd approved. And every time she asked, Daniel had an answer. Smooth, immediate, reasonable. Too reasonable. Lila, always just, happened to be involved. I needed help. It was temporary. I didn't want to worry you. Excuses that sounded fine until you lined them up. And Ava did. Quietly, privately. No accusations, no scenes. Because she wasn't reacting anymore. She was building something, piece by piece. Then came the moment that changed suspicion into something else. Something undeniable. A folded envelope, left carelessly on the counter. Medical. Lila's name. Ava almost didn't open it. Almost. But something about that night. Those words, too late, pushed her. She unfolded the paper slowly. Her eyes scanned once, then again. And then, stopped. Pregnancy confirmation, dated weeks earlier, weeks before Lila had said anything. Weeks before there had been any mention of a relationship. Timeline, that's what Ava focused on. Not emotion, not betrayal. Named timeline, because timelines don't lie. And this one didn't make sense. Not with the story Lila had told, not with the way Daniel had been acting, not with anything. Unless there was something they weren't saying. Ava folded the paper carefully, placed it back exactly where she found it. No shaking hands, no tears. Just clarity. Because now, this wasn't a feeling anymore. It was a problem. And Ava Carter? She didn't guess. She proved. But here's where it gets interesting. She still didn't confront them. Not then. Not even after that. Because she wasn't asking if something was wrong anymore. She was asking, how far does this actually go? And the answer? It was worse than she expected. Because the truth wasn't just betrayal, it was coordination. And she was already inside it. And she just hadn't seen the full design yet. And by the time she did, it was already in motion. That's when I stopped being a wife and started paying attention. Because once Ava saw the pattern, she couldn't go back to pretending it wasn't there. So she didn't. She adapted. No confrontations, no emotional outbursts, no giving them a reason to change their behavior. Instead, she became invisible. Not physically, but predictably. Still kind, still cooperative, still Ava. And that's what made it work, because Daniel stopped hiding. And Lila? She got comfortable. That's the thing about secrets. They don't stay careful forever. They get lazy. And Ava was waiting for that. She started small. Bank statements first, late at night when both of them were asleep, and she'd sit in the living room with her laptop open, scrolling through transactions. Patterns emerged fast, repeated transfers, same amounts, same recipient, not random, not occasional, consistent, deliberate, and the account, it wasn't labeled. But Ava didn't need a label. She followed the trail, cross-referenced dates, matched them with days Lila had mentioned needing help. It lined up too perfectly. Then came the phones. Not snooping blindly, Ava wasn't reckless. She waited. Moments where Daniel left his phone unattended. Seconds, not minutes, enough. Messages weren't obvious at first because Daniel wasn't stupid. But he wasn't careful enough. Deleted threads leave gaps, and Ava noticed gaps. Numbers without names. Conversations that clearly continued but had no beginning. So she dug deeper. Phone records. More timestamps, duration. And suddenly, a story started forming. Late night calls, frequent, too frequent. Always when Ava was asleep or not home. And Lila, her schedule matched. Exactly. Coincidence doesn't repeat like that. By the end of the second week, Ava wasn't guessing anymore. She knew. But knowing wasn't enough. She needed proof. Something undeniable. Something that didn't rely on interpretation. And that's when it happened. The confirmation she didn't even realize she was waiting for. A receipt? Simple, digital, overlooked. Daniel had forwarded himself a document and forgotten to delete it. Ava opened it. One glance. That was all it took. Prenatal appointment. Patient, Lila Carter. Emergency contact, Daniel Carter. Not Ava, not a friend. Daniel. There it was. Clean, clear, irrefutable. No assumptions. No guessing, just fact. And in that moment, everything clicked. The late nights, the money, the whispers, the pregnancy. There was no mystery anymore. Daniel wasn't supporting Lila. He was hiding her. And the baby? It wasn't someone else's problem. It was his. And that realization, it should have broken something, should have triggered anger, screaming, something. But Ava, she just sat there, quiet, still, processing. Because this wasn't just betrayal, it was structure, planned, maintained, protected. Which meant one thing. This wasn't new, and if it wasn't new, then it wasn't accidental. It was intentional. That's when Ava made her decision. She wasn't going to confront them, not yet. Because confrontation ends things, and Ava, she wasn't ready for it to end, not until she understood everything. So instead, she went somewhere else. A lawyer, private, discreet, efficient. She brought everything, the transactions, the records, the timelines. And then she brought the agreement, the one Daniel had asked her to sign months earlier. Just restructuring, he had said. Tax optimization. At the time, it had made sense. At the time. But now Ava read it differently, line by line, clause by clause, and buried deep inside, there it was. Financial responsibility for dependents within the household structure. A trap, clear as day, designed to sound neutral, flexible, but dangerous, because all it needed was a dependent. And suddenly, everything made sense. This wasn't damage control. This was a setup. Daniel hadn't just made a mistake. He had planned a solution, one where Ava paid for it, legally, cleanly, quietly, unless something interrupted that plan. And that's where Ava changed the game. Because what Daniel didn't realize was that agreements, they can be modified, amended, strengthened. And Ava, she didn't break the contract. She improved it, carefully, legally, irreversibly. So when the time came, she didn't argue, didn't resist, didn't expose anything. When they sat her down, told her about the baby, explained what they needed from her, Ava just listened, nodded, and agreed. Completely. And that's the part they never questioned, because to them, it looked like surrender. But it wasn't. It was timing, because Ava already knew something they didn't, something that would only matter if they pushed this all the way, if they forced it into the open, if they brought it to court. And the moment they did, they wouldn't be controlling the outcome anymore. They'd be revealing it themselves. And Ava, she'd be ready. By the time we reached court, they thought they had already won. And honestly, from the outside, it looked like they had. Think about it. A signed agreement, a pregnancy, a unified family standing on one side. And Ava, alone. No visible anger, no dramatic defense, no urgency to fight back. If you were watching from the gallery, you'd already know how this ends. At least, that's what everyone thought. Because Daniel played his role perfectly. Confident posture, measured tone, the kind of calm that comes from believing you've controlled every variable. We're simply asking for enforcement of what was agreed, his lawyer said smoothly, pacing just enough to command attention. Mrs. Carter entered into a legally binding arrangement regarding shared financial obligations. Clean, professional, convincing, even the judge nodded slightly. Because on paper, it made sense. And Daniel knew it. That's why he didn't look at Ava much. He didn't need to. To him, she was already handled. But Lila, she couldn't stop glancing. Quick looks, nervous, searching, because somewhere deep down, she knew something wasn't right. Ava wasn't reacting the way she should. No panic, no desperation, just patience. And patience in a situation like this, it's unsettling. You understood the nature of the agreement when you signed it, correct? The lawyer continued, now directing the question at Ava. A trap. Simple, direct. A yes would confirm everything. Wait, a no would make her look dishonest. Ava didn't rush to answer. She tilted her head slightly, like she was considering how much truth to give. Then, yes. The word landed softly, but it echoed, because once again, she wasn't resisting. Daniel allowed himself a small exhale. There it was. Confirmation, validation, closure. Except, he missed the part where Ava never said which version of the agreement she understood. And that detail was everything. Because while they were presenting a single document, Ava had brought the full version. And now, it was time. Her lawyer finally stood. Not aggressively, not dramatically, just precisely. Your Honor, we'd like to submit a complete record of the agreement referenced. Complete. The word hung in the air, not because it implied something dangerous. Something was missing. Daniel frowned slightly. There is no. Sit down, his lawyer whispered sharply. Too late. The doubt had already entered the room. Ava didn't speak. She didn't need to. She simply reached forward and opened the folder again. The same one. The one they hadn't taken seriously. Until now. Paper slid against wood as she lifted the first page, then the next. Then, the addendum. The moment. The shift. Permission to read? She asked calmly. The judge nodded. And just like that, control transferred completely. Ava's voice filled the room again. Steady, controlled, unhurried. She didn't rush, didn't skip, because every word mattered. Every clause was a thread, and she was about to pull all of them. In the event of deception, she began, when Daniel stiffened. Undisclosed relationships? Lila's breath caught. Or intentional financial manipulation? Now her father leaned forward, because suddenly, this didn't sound like a safety net. It sounded like a trigger, a mechanism, a failsafe. Ava paused. Let it settle. Let them hear it. Let them understand it. Then she finished. This agreement becomes null and void. All financial responsibility transfers to the violating party. Silence. Not confusion, not hesitation, recognition, immediate. Daniel's face didn't just change, it collapsed. Like something inside him had just dropped out completely. Because he understood, instantly, what this meant. But Ava wasn't done, not even close, because a clause means nothing, without proof. And Ava, she had that too. She reached into the folder again. A different set of documents this time. Thicker, heavier. Would you like me to continue? She asked, polite, almost gentle. But there was something underneath now, something sharper, because this wasn't defense anymore. This was exposure, and Daniel knew it. Don't, he started. Too late. The judge raised a hand. Proceed. And just like that, everything they built their case on was about to turn against them, because the next thing Ava was about to read wasn't a clause, it was proof. And once it was said out loud, there would be no taking it back. The truth doesn't explode all at once. It unfolds. And Ava made sure of that. She didn't rush, didn't dump everything at once. Because chaos fades quickly. But precision? Precision lingers. She lifted the next document slowly, letting the silence stretch just enough to make everyone lean in. Financial transfers, she said calmly, from Daniel Carter to Lila Carter. Paper turned, date by date, amount by amount, clear, organized, undeniable. Ava didn't look at them. She didn't need to. The numbers were doing the talking now. Consistent payments over the last 4 months, she continued. Unaccounted for within shared financial disclosures. Daniel shifted beside his lawyer. That doesn't prove anything. It proves concealment, Ava replied, not raising her voice, just correcting him. Like a fact, like a number that doesn't need emotion to be true. The judge leaned forward now, attention fully locked. Continue, and Ava did. Next document. Phone records. She placed them down, highlighted, time-stamped, late-night calls, repeated, infrequent. Communication between Daniel Carter and Lila Carter, she said, primarily during hours when I was not present or asleep. Lila shook her head instinctively. That's not... But she stopped herself, because denying something that specific, it doesn't land the way people think it does. Ava turned one more page, and this time, she finally looked at Daniel. Directly, no softness left. Prenatal medical record, she said, and then she read it. Emergency contact Daniel Carter. That was it. That was the moment everything snapped into clarity for everyone in the room. Not suspicion, not implication, fact. The judge's expression hardened. Mr. Carter, would you like to explain why you are listed as the primary contact for your sister-in-law's pregnancy? Silence. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, and looked at his lawyer. Because there are moments where strategy disappears, And reality takes over. This was one of them. Lila stepped back, shaking her head. Daniel, say something. But there was nothing left to say, because the truth had already been said. Ava didn't interrupt, didn't push. She simply placed the final document down, carefully, deliberately. The addendum, she said, her voice returning to that same calm control from the beginning, was created to protect against exactly this. She let that sit, because now everything connected. The agreement, the clause, the evidence, the intention. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. And it had failed. Completely. The judge didn't take long. He didn't need to. The original agreement, he said firmly, one is rendered unenforceable under the conditions outlined in the addendum. A pause. Then, all financial responsibility falls solely on Mr. Carter. Clean, decisive, final. But he didn't stop there. Furthermore, he continued flipping through the documents, there is sufficient indication of intentional financial concealment and misrepresentation. This court will be referring this matter for further review. That word, review, landed heavier than anything else, because it meant this wasn't over for Daniel, not even close. And that's when the room finally broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in fragments. Lila sank back into her chair, her composure gone, replaced with something raw and unfiltered. You said this would work? She whispered, more to Daniel than anyone else. Their father looked between them, in confusion twisting into something harsher, realization. You planned this? He asked, his voice quieter now, not authoritative, not certain. Their mother didn't speak at all. She just stared at Ava, like she was seeing her for the first time, not as the daughter who kept things together, but as someone who had been underestimated. And Ava? She didn't smile this time. She didn't need to. Because what she felt wasn't victory. It wasn't satisfaction. It was something quieter, heavier, closure. She stood slowly, gathering her papers. Not rushed, not dramatic. Just finished. Then she looked at Daniel, one last time. You didn't just betray me, she said, her voice steady, unshaken. You planned it. No anger, no shouting, just truth. And somehow, that landed harder than anything else she could have said. And the fallout didn't stay in that courtroom. It spread. Fast. Daniel's situation unraveled almost immediately. The financial review turned into a formal investigation. Hidden transfers, misrepresented accounts. What started as a personal scheme became a legal problem, serious enough to threaten everything he had tried to protect. His job? Suspended pending investigation. His reputation? Gone. Because stories like this don't stay private. Not when court records exist. Not when people talk. And they did. Lila, she was left exactly where Ava had been expected to stand. Unsupported, exposed, dependent, only now on someone who was already collapsing. The illusion she had relied on? Gone. Completely. Their parents tried, at first, calls, messages, explanations. Let's talk. It got out of hand. We didn't know everything, but Ava didn't respond. Not once. Because some things don't get repaired through conversation. Some things end. Cleanly. And this was one of them. The divorce followed quickly. With the evidence Ava had documented, there was no drawn-out battle. No ambiguity. Assets were reviewed. Separated, protected, exactly the way Ava had prepared for. Months later, everything was quiet again. Not the same quiet. Not the kind filled with tension or avoidance. A different kind. Intentional. Controlled. Ava sat at a desk in her new apartment. Minimal. Organized. Hers. Sunlight filtered through the window as she flipped through a familiar folder. The same one. The same documents. But this time, they felt different. Not like a weapon. Not like a shield. Just finished. A closed chapter. Her phone buzzed lightly beside her. A message, Daniel, a request, a settlement discussion. Something procedural. Ava glanced at it. Then, without hesitation, she turned the phone face down. Ignored. Not out of anger, out of finality. She closed the folder, slid it into a drawer, and for a moment, just sat there, still, breathing, not overwhelmed, not broken, just steady. Because in the end, they hadn't just underestimated her, they had relied on it, built a plan around it, and signed it into place. Ava leaned back slightly, her expression calm, unchanged, but lighter somehow. And as the sunlight shifted across the room, she said quietly, almost to herself, "They thought they wrote my ending." A small pause. And then, but they signed theirs instead. And this time, there was nothing left unfinished.